I never expected blood to stain the pine-needled earth outside my quiet lake cabin. But when the shriek of gunfire shattered the silence and my oldest friend dropped to the ground clutching his side, I knew this wasn't going to be another petty HOA dispute. It was war. Karen, the self-appointed tyrant of our homeowners association, had been escalating for months, writing fines for non-existent violations, banging on my door about unauthorized gatherings, and threatening legal action. Over my dock being half a foot too long? No one thought she'd take it further. Not even after she started openly carrying a pistol and calling the police over imagined code infractions. She'd warned me more than once, in that brittle, passive-aggressive tone, that if I didn't follow the rules, consequences would follow. But even with all that, none of us expected she'd actually pull the trigger. The weekend had started normally. My buddy Jacob, a Marine vet still untangling the wreckage of a rough divorce, had driven up for some fishing, quiet and decent beer. We'd spent Friday evening grilling, reminiscing, and dodging mosquitoes with citronella torches and bad jokes. I'd warned him about Karen, of course. Everyone got warned about Karen. She was like the boss level of HOA nightmares. Karen lived 4 houses down, in a cottage twice renovated and 3 times mortgaged, festooned with neighborhood watch signs and trimmed hedges that looked like they'd been shaped with laser precision. She had surveillance cameras on every corner of her property, and one pointed suspiciously at my driveway. Her front porch bore a massive placard that read, "Community pride starts with you." She had filed over 60 complaints in a single year. Her name was practically a curse word at town hall. I kept my property in good shape, but that didn't matter to Karen. My guests parked incorrectly. My porch light was too bright. My American flag was slightly faded. Once left a typewritten note in my mailbox, outlining the unregistered noise pollution my dog allegedly caused at dawn. Another time, she demanded to inspect my recycling bins to ensure compliance. I declined. She called the sheriff. Despite all that, I tried to keep the peace. I waved. I smiled. I even cleared her driveway one snowy winter just to avoid the inevitable HOA fine she'd try to impose, but with Karen, courtesy was just another weakness to be weaponized. Her favorite phrase was, "I'm just doing my duty." Her least favorite was, "You're overstepping." And today, she had clearly overstepped in the most dangerous way possible. The sun was just beginning to set when it happened. Jacob and I had set up at the fire pit with a cooler and a portable speaker playing some low-volume blues. He walked over to grab his second beer from the cooler, maybe 20 feet from the road. That's when Karen appeared. No warning, no hello, just a shrill voice cutting through the trees. "This is private property." Jacob turned, confused, holding up his hands like, "What's the problem?" I stood up, already moving toward the confrontation, but Karen wasn't interested in explanations. She was clutching that ridiculous HOA binder to her chest with one hand, the other already reaching into her jacket. "You've been warned," she shrieked. And then the shot. The sound was sharp and hollow, louder than I expected, echoing across the lake. Jacob stumbled, eyes wide, and dropped to his knees, blood blooming through his t-shirt like a red flower. In time-lapse, Karen just stood there, shaking, still holding the gun, as if she couldn't believe what she'd done. I was already shouting, already running, already pulling out my phone. But Karen beat me too. She dialed 911. She was sobbing into the phone, breathless, terrified. He charged at me. He was threatening me. I had no choice. But my security cameras told a different story. 3 angles, crystal clear, with audio, no charge. Just an innocent man fetching a beer and a vigilante with a vendetta. The police arrived faster than I expected, almost like they'd been waiting nearby. Karen was sitting on the ground by then, face pale, hands still shaking. She pointed at me the moment the first deputy stepped out. "He's been harassing me for months. That's his accomplice." The deputy looked between us. I stayed calm. I knew better than to escalate. I showed them the footage. No one said a word for the first few minutes while it played. The audio caught every second, her yelling, the accusation, the shot, Jacob's scream. The second deputy's face went hard and professional. First officer quietly asked Karen to stand. "We're going to ask you to come with us," he said. Karen shrieked like it was a betrayal. You're arresting me? I'm the victim. He had a beer? He was drunk. What if he lunged at me? Her voice cracked. No one responded. One of the officers cuffed her gently but firmly. Her eyes locked onto mine. Hatred, fear, panic, but also confusion, like she'd expected to get away with it. Meanwhile, Jacob was loaded into the ambulance, still conscious but fading fast. I rode with him. His blood was everywhere on the seats, my shirt, the EMT's gloves. He gripped my hand and muttered, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. At the hospital, they stabilized him quickly. The bullet had missed anything vital, but barely. I called his sister. I called my lawyer. I called a number I hadn't dialed in years of contact from my federal contracting days. I didn't explain much. I just said it happened. "We're moving forward," he replied. "Understood." Team's already spinning up. What Karen didn't know, what no one in that sleepy HOA knew, was that I wasn't just some retiree with a nice cabin. I had a past. The kind you don't write down. The kind that leaves marks deeper than scars. And now, because she couldn't keep her paranoia in check, the past was about to crash into her world like a tactical battering ram. By morning, she was in holding, and the cabin was quiet again except for the hum of federal-grade surveillance. Tech being installed and the unmarked SUVs parked on the old forest road, hidden just enough to avoid attention. I briefed the team personally, showed them the footage, gave them my theory. This wasn't just Karen. It was the whole HOA. They nodded. They'd seen worse, but not by much, because when small power goes unchecked, it mutates. And Karen had mutated to something cruel, petty, and now criminal. My strike team wasn't here to clean up a mess. They were here to expose the system behind it. And Karen, she'd just become patient zero. We started digging. Property records, financials, complaint logs, surveillance tech orders. Someone had been funding her activities, expensive cameras, legal filings, even consulting fees to a security strategist in another state. The HOA account showed irregular withdrawals, fake invoices, duplicate charges. Someone was laundering money through neighborhood politics. Every file we opened told a new story. Elderly residents fined into foreclosure. Families surveilled, tenants driven out over bogus violations. Karen wasn't just obsessed, she was effective, and she'd built a paper fortress around herself to keep it going. But paper burns. More we uncovered, the more obvious it became. This wasn't about code enforcement. It was about control. Karen had weaponized the HOA to become her personal fiefdom, punishing dissenters and rewarding informants. She had maps, charts, incident reports that read like military intel. She wasn't running a neighborhood. She was running an operation. And now, so were we. But ours came with subpoenas, federal ones, the kind that don't get ignored. Karen's arrest made local news within 12 hours, but the real story hadn't started yet. While she sat behind county bars ranting about bylaws and her constitutional right to defend property, my federal contacts were decrypting gigabytes of data pulled from HOA servers and Karen's home office. Hidden cameras, digital logs even, keyword alerts, set to flag phrases like Karen abuse or illegal fine in community emails. It was surveillance masked as order, miniature police state wrapped in pastel siding and lawn signs. Agent Rowe took lead for cybercrime. Unit, quiet, precise, not one for small talk. His team had been prepping for an operation like this for months, but Karen gave them the entry point. Once they realized this wasn't isolated, everything clicked. Multiple neighborhoods, similar tactics, identical wording in HOA charters. It wasn't one bad apple, it was a garden of rot. My cabin turned into a temporary operations base. Maps on the walls, photos, flowcharts, data lines connecting people like a spider web of HOA corruption. I watched them peel back layers of a system I'd lived under for years without knowing its depth. I wasn't paranoid. I'd just been unaware. Karen was just one node. Rowe briefed me on the bigger picture over bitter coffee and old war stories. He told me some of the same tactics were used in authoritarian monitoring programs abroad. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't suburban drama. This was scalable oppression disguised as regulation. And Karen had taken it a step further, armed enforcement. They found payments routed through shell companies, disguised as landscaping contracts and community maintenance upgrades. Vendors didn't exist. Digital invoices were duplicated, sometimes triplicated. Karen wasn't just enforcing HOA law, she was profiting from it. And if she was, others were too. This was organized exploitation. The team made a decision: escalate jurisdiction. That meant federal warrants, sealed orders, and stealth entry into neighboring HOA board meetings undercover. Within 24 hours, 3 other HOA leaders were under investigation. Karen's laptop had cracked open a trove of connections, emails, meeting transcripts. Payment histories. One particular email chain stood out. Karen had corresponded with someone labeled only as CB consultant. CB offered strategies on behavioral control through administrative fatigue. Basically, drown people in paperwork and fines until they give up. It worked. I'd seen good neighbors break under it. Now I knew why. Neighbors began talking once they saw the SUVs. One approached me with shaking hands and a manila envelope. Inside, copies of threats she'd received from Karen, photos of her kids walking to school with red circles drawn around their faces, security risks, Karen had labeled them. The woman had been too afraid to speak, till now. Karen's vice president folded within 6 hours of federal questioning, gave up names, showed emails, confirmed the network reached across state lines, told us Karen had been planning a security pilot program involving license plate tracking. It had already been implemented in 3 test communities. No one had consented. When I visited Jacob in the hospital again, I showed him the preliminary report. He skimmed the lines, then looked up, eyes glassy. So she really thought she was doing good? I nodded. She thought she was saving the neighborhood. He muttered, feels more like she was trying to own it. We both knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But the strike team was moving fast now, faster than the system could respond. Karen's world of paperwork and control was collapsing. Under something she never expected: real accountability. Not HOA threats, federal subpoenas, real-time audits. Prison time. They found a safe in her garage, hidden behind faux insulation panels. Inside, resident profiles, psychological notes, labeled cooperative, neutral, and dissenting. The detail was chilling. Family routines, work schedules, pet names. She knew everything. This wasn't vigilance. It was obsession weaponized. Remember Rowe reading the documents, his face unreadable. Then he said, she's not the architect, she's the disciple. It changed everything, because it meant there was someone else behind the curtain, someone teaching people like Karen how to build and weaponize control. That's who we were after now. My cabin was under constant surveillance hours. Snottersand, the perimeter was tripled at night, just in case. No one trusted the HOA network to take this lying down. We had evidence, but they had eyes everywhere. Cameras, drones, possibly even backdoor access to local police dispatch. Roe and I sat on my porch that night, watching the lake. You ever think it'd come to this? He asked. I laughed. No. I thought she'd leave another nasty note about my garbage bins. Not shoot my guest. Looked out across the dark water and said, most wars start with someone trying to feel important. By morning, 4 more HOA officials had been picked up. One in a bathrobe, another trying to destroy a hard drive in a blender. Watched the arrests through live drone feeds streamed to my laptop. None of them resisted. They looked shocked. Betrayed, like they never thought the rules they enforced would apply to them. The community woke up to silence. No HOA emails. No threats. No pink slips tucked under windshield wipers. It was like someone hit pause on the tyranny. Neighbors began stepping outside again, talking, asking questions, reclaiming their space. It was beautiful, and it was just the beginning, but I wasn't naive. This wasn't over. It was systemic. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. HOS had become front-facing shells for something older, something more insidious. Karen had given it a face. Now we needed to find the hand that was pulling the strings, and when we did, I'd be there with evidence, with names, and with a reckoning. The storm didn't hit all at once. It unfolded slowly. It's like rot creeping beneath. Polished floors. As news spread of Karen's arrest and the expanding investigation, a quiet dread took over the HOA communities. Board members who once barked about weeds and paint shades suddenly stopped answering emails. Websites went offline. Emergency meetings were canceled without explanation. We got our first major break from a whistleblower in a neighboring county. An anonymous email with a secure Dropbox link led us to internal documents from a shadow company called Orion Residential Strategies. On the surface, they sold HOA management software. Underneath, they provided behavioral analytics, crowd influence tools, and methods for behavioral correction via procedural fatigue. They were the architects. Karen was just the student. Rose's team began contacting former employees of Orion. Some declined, a few talked. One, a former systems engineer named Talia, agreed to meet in a parking garage 2 towns over. She chain-smoked through the entire conversation. Told us they'd beta-tested control models in affluent suburbs because compliance is easier when people think they're in charge. Her words, "Your neighbor isn't watching you because she's curious. She's watching because someone told her it's patriotic." The data confirmed it. Orion had developed software that tracked resident behavior, built predictive models based on minor infractions, and advised HOA boards on how to isolate, fine, or discredit targets before they became legal liabilities. One neighborhood had implemented a digital watch list. Another had formed a so-called compliance committee, essentially civilian informants. The script was spreading. The implications were horrifying. Karen wasn't just part of a rogue HOA board. She was the byproduct of a coordinated test of psychological control. Dozens of neighborhoods across 4 states showed similar signs: escalating enforcement, surveillance upgrades, identical charter revisions. It was like watching a virus spread through civic systems. Not a bug, a feature. I confronted one of our own town's former board members, Harold, retired insurance agent, proud veteran, previously harmless. I asked him if he'd ever heard of Orion. He looked pale, shook his head, but his voice cracked when I mentioned the behavioral correction modules. Whispered we didn't know it went that far. They thought it was a tool. It had become a weapon. That night, someone left a printed dossier in my mailbox, no return address, no digital trace. Inside, transcripts from Karen's private calls, including one where she spoke with an Orion advisor. If we let them question everything, we lose the HOA. The structure must be preserved at all costs. It wasn't about safety. It was about dominance. Jacob was healing well, his spirit less so. He couldn't sleep, kept his hospital blinds closed, said he felt watched. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The veteran home from war, shot by a neighbor in a gated community for holding a beer. "Maybe I'm the lucky one," he said. "At least I saw the bullet coming." I didn't laugh. We reached out to the Department of Justice, presented our evidence. They were interested, cautious, but interested. One official admitted they'd flagged Orion years ago, but lacked hard proof. Now, thanks to Karen's recklessness, we had more than proof. We had a pattern. The DOJ assigned a task force, quietly, carefully, but it was real. Meanwhile, the neighborhood transformed. No Karen, no enforcement. Residents began asking for open elections, policy reviews, transparency audits. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to speak. A block party formed. Sanctioned music played. Kids rode bikes past 6 p.m., a symbolic revolution, complete with fireworks. We knew we'd stirred a hornet's nest. Orion went dark, servers wiped, staff unreachable, websites pulled. That meant they were preparing to defend or disappear. Either option was dangerous. We redoubled security, surveillance, increased our surveillance. The hunters were now the hunted, and they didn't like it. Agent Rowe warned me it could escalate. People don't build systems like this unless they're ready to protect them. I understood these weren't HOA scolds anymore. They were architects of control, facing exposure. The deeper we went, the more we saw that the public hadn't been resisting. It had been trained not to. I started recording everything. Voice memos, video logs, secure backups. If they came for me, I wanted the story out. I wasn't scared, just focused. My cabin, my supposed retreat, was now a data center, a communications hub, and possibly a target.
Ow.
I reinforced the doors, armed the perimeter, left nothing to chance. Karen, meanwhile, remained in federal custody, awaiting trial. Her lawyer, a bombastic local with cable news ambitions, claimed she'd been manipulated by federal entrapment. The judge wasn't buying it, but the media was. Headlines shifted from HOA tyrant to suburban scapegoat. It was propaganda, and it worked. Public sympathy swelled, not from those she'd hurt, but from strangers who saw her as a warning that even petty power could be punished. They missed the point entirely. Karen wasn't the victim. She was the tip of a spear. But that's how disinformation works, framing truth until it folds under weight. We pushed forward anyway. Another whistleblower came forward from Texas. She'd worked on HOA compliance training, received manuals from Orion titled Maintaining Order Without Resistance. One section advised creating a neighborhood enemy, someone to rally fear around. Karen had chosen me. Classic tactic. I remembered the summer she'd fined me for having a trailer in my driveway for 19 hours. It was empty. Legal limit was 24. She sent pictures, cited bylaws. I paid the fee to avoid conflict. That was my first mistake. Every time we yield to unjust power, we legitimize it. I wouldn't make that mistake again. By the end of the month, subpoenas had gone out across 5 states. Karen's trial date was set. Orion's executives were being sought. We had names, timelines, and allies now. We weren't just survivors. We were a resistance. And we were just getting started. It started with silence, a kind of national pause as the federal subpoenas went out, and HOAs across the country scrambled to clean house. Boards resigned, files disappeared, community message boards were wiped. Those who once barked rules through clenched teeth suddenly claimed ignorance, but it was too late. The system had already been exposed. The DOJ task force expanded. Orion's funding trails led to political action committees, real estate syndicates, and a tech firm in Virginia that specialized in predictive crime software. Their goal wasn't neighborhood safety. It was behavior modification at scale. If it worked in suburbs, it could work in cities. If it worked in cities, it could shape elections. The HOA model was just the prototype. I stood on my porch every morning watching the lake and wondering how many Karens had slipped through the cracks. Ours made a mistake. She acted too soon, drew too much attention. But there had to be others. Smarter, subtler, ones who didn't shoot, ones who let the software do the work while they smiled at bake sales and used drones to enforce fence height. Row confirmed the concern. More nodes were lighting up on their internal map. He started calling it a civic parasite burrowing into local governance structures, masquerading as community enforcement while gathering data and consolidating influence. The virus didn't spread through fear. It spread through routine. Paperwork, through policy. We needed a win. Something public, something undeniable. That came from a raid in Arizona, where a gated community's HOA president had installed biometric locks on public amenities, restricting access to preferred compliance tiers. Translation: toe the line or lose your pool, gym, and park. Access. When residents protested, fines tripled. When one family refused to pay, yet their car was towed at midnight. The federal raid on that HOA was broadcast, live drones circling above, agents moving in. Files were seized, a literal server room found behind a fake maintenance closet. The footage went viral. People started questioning their own HOAs. Some held emergency meetings. Some burned their charters. Others just watched in disbelief, asking, could this be happening here too? I started hearing from people I hadn't spoken to in years, old neighbors, high school friends, even a former commanding officer. They all had stories, different towns, different HOAs, but similar patterns. Sudden rule changes, data collection, suppression of dissent. It was everywhere, like mold you didn't notice until it was too late. Jacob was home now, walking with a cane but standing tall. He came to the cabin one morning with coffee and that same deadpan humor. So we burning down another HOA today? I smiled. Only metaphorically. He nodded. Shame. I was starting to enjoy the chaos. But the truth was, it never stopped feeling personal for him, for me. For all of us. Karen's trial moved forward, but slowly. Her legal team kept filing motions, trying to suppress evidence, challenge jurisdiction, reframe her as an overwhelmed civic leader. But the footage was too clear, the data too damning. And more than that, her arrogance was her undoing. She never thought she'd lose. That's why she documented everything. During discovery, we unearthed her personal notes, a spiral-bound notebook, filled with phrases like control through stability and disorder is the enemy. She had drawn hierarchies of neighborhood influence, diagrams of power networks, and threat assessments on residents who had never done more than plant daisies too close to the curb. It was suburban authoritarianism written in gel pen. One note stood out. He's not afraid. He's dangerous. It was about me. I read it 3 times. It didn't make me angry. It made me certain that we were right to fight. Certain that she had become so consumed by control that she couldn't imagine anyone existing outside of it. That made me her enemy. I was fine with that. Public opinion began to shift again. Not just sympathy or outrage, but curiosity. People wanted to understand how it happened, how power crept in, how fear made them complicit. We were invited to speak on a panel. Roe declined. Jacob refused. I went, told the story, showed the data, offered the warning. Authoritarianism doesn't start with armies. It starts with paperwork and silence. After that, things moved faster. More raids, more resignations. One major HOA management firm folded overnight. Orion's former executives were subpoenaed. Some ran, some flipped. One was found dead in a motel room in Colorado. Official cause: overdose. The documents he left behind told a different story. Internal memos, expansion plans, targets. It wasn't just about HOAs anymore. The tactics were being adopted in school boards, condo associations, even churches. It where collective trust could be weaponized. That was the lesson. If you can build fear into the rules, you can make people police themselves. Karen hadn't created the disease. She had simply become its most visible symptom. We published a report redacted where necessary, but detailed enough to shake people awake, titled Democracy by Design, Suburban Authoritarianism and Behavioral Control. It went viral. Some praised us. Some mocked us. Some tried to hack our servers. But the truth was out now. And truth, once named, spreads like fire. I kept the cabin as headquarters. I had offers to relocate, to move somewhere less exposed, but I refused. This was my home. And more than that, this was ground zero. If they wanted to intimidate me, they'd have to do it in daylight. I planted a new flagpole, replaced the flag, made sure it was clean, upright, and visible from every angle. That summer, we held a town hall at the lake, open invite. Hundreds came. No permits, no board approval, just people. Talking, listening, sharing the smell of grilled food. Mixed with the sound of live music and kids laughing, it felt like victory, like a return to something honest, something human. But I knew it wasn't over. Karen might have fired the first shot, but the system that created her still breathed, still adapted. Somewhere out there, another clipboard waited, another HOA handbook ready to be weaponized. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. We all were now, and we weren't going quiet again.